Picture this. After decades of pouring resources into building one of the world's largest and most advanced navies, the Chinese Communist Party decides it's time to flex its muscles. They dispatch not one, but two imposing warships to the South China Sea, their mission clear: intimidate a lone Philippine Coast Guard vessel, and send a message to the world that China's claims over these contested waters are not to be challenged. The plan? Simple. Show overwhelming force, rattle the opposition, and reinforce China's sweeping territorial ambitions. The world was supposed to see a flawless display of naval power, an unspoken warning to any who might question Beijing's authority. But then, in a twist no one saw coming, the two Chinese warships, meant to be symbols of unity and strength, end up colliding with each other. Instead of a show of dominance, the world witnesses a scene straight out of slapstick comedy, a high-stakes game of bumper cars, but with billion-dollar warships. The Philippine crew, stunned by the chaos unfolding before them, quickly grabs their phones and cameras. They capture every moment, the screech of metal, plumes of smoke billowing from the damaged ships, and the unmistakable sound of panic echoing across the water. This wasn't just a minor scrape or a private embarrassment, it was a spectacular, very public disaster, one that played out in front of cameras and quickly spread across the globe. For a regime obsessed with projecting an image of total control and military precision, this was nothing short of catastrophic. The carefully crafted illusion of Chinese naval supremacy was shattered in an instant. The world saw not invincible war machines but vulnerable vessels and rattled sailors. The myth of flawless Chinese seamanship was left in tatters. It's one thing to build massive, intimidating ships. It's another thing entirely to operate them with skill and discipline. This incident exposed a glaring gap between China's ambitions and its actual capabilities. In a single clumsy moment, China's narrative of unstoppable power was undermined more effectively than years of diplomatic protests or rival military maneuvers ever could. Sometimes the biggest bully on the block turns out to be the clumsiest, tripping over its own feet when the world is watching most closely. And in this case, the entire world was watching, taking notes, and perhaps even laughing a little at the spectacle. Why all the drama over the South China Sea? It's the world's busiest aquatic highway. Trillions in trade pass through every year. Control means economic leverage. Let your friends in, lock rivals out. Beneath the waves, oil, gas, and fisheries that feed millions. Several countries claim these waters, backed by international law, UNCLOS. Most play by the rules. China doesn't. For Beijing, it's not just about resources, it's about national pride and rewriting history. The CCP calls it blue national soil, a symbol of resurgence. Their obsession drives aggression and sometimes embarrassing mishaps. The South China Sea is a geopolitical powder keg, and China's actions keep lighting the fuse. What's behind China's sweeping claim to the South China Sea? It all comes down to the infamous 9-dash line, a U-shaped boundary that snakes across the map, scooping up nearly the entire South China Sea and overlapping with the exclusive economic zones of several other countries. China's so-called evidence? A handful of ancient fishing trips, some pottery shards, and vague references in old records. These are the thin threads used to stitch together a sweeping territorial claim. By that logic, Italy could claim half the world for the Romans, just because their empire once stretched across continents. History doesn't work that way, and neither does international law. International law is clear. Historical anecdotes and artifacts don't grant ownership of oceans. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea sets the rules, not ancient stories. In 2016, the Philippines challenged China's claim at an international tribunal and won a landmark victory. The Hague ruled decisively. China's so-called historic rights have no legal basis under international law. The verdict was clear, and the world took notice. China's response? Ignore the ruling, ramp up its naval presence, and double down on aggressive tactics, confronting foreign vessels and building artificial islands. The 9-dash line is more propaganda than fact, a story repeated so often it's become a national myth. Admitting it's fiction would undermine the Chinese Communist Party's legitimacy and challenge the narrative they've built for decades. So the government keeps pushing the claim, even if it means alienating neighbors, risking conflict, and ramming their own ships into others in disputed waters. The result? A dangerous flashpoint, fueled by myth and nationalism, not by law or fact. The world sees through the charade, and global leaders are increasingly vocal about the need for a rules-based order in the region. But for China, backing down isn't an option. The 9-dash line has become a matter of national pride, and the stakes have never been higher. How do you take over a sea without starting a war? China's answer: salami slicing and the cabbage strategy. Salami slicing, small incremental moves, fishing boats, coast guard, then permanent outposts. Each step is minor, but together, they change the facts on the water. The cabbage strategy surround contested areas with layers of ships, navy, coast guard, and civilian militia. It's a blockade disguised as normal activity. These tactics are on display daily. Chinese boats anchoring for months, water cannons, lasers, and dangerous maneuvers. They push boundaries, hoping others won't escalate. The recent collision, a failed intimidation that backfired spectacularly. China's creeping expansion is relentless. But sometimes the strategy unravels in public, and the world takes note. Subtlety out, spectacle in. Enter the Great Wall of Sand. Since 2013, China has built artificial islands atop reefs, transforming them into military fortresses. Dredgers pile up sand, then come airstrips, ports, missile batteries. These aren't resorts, they're unsinkable aircraft carriers projecting power deep into the sea. The world condemned the move. Xi Jinping promised no militarization, then did exactly that. These islands defy international law and threaten neighbor sovereignty. They're the concrete embodiment of the 9-dash line. The recent collision happened in their shadow, a reminder that hardware can't hide human error. China's island building raised tensions to a boil, and now their own blunder has exposed the cracks. Back to the main event. Two Chinese warships, in a tense standoff with a much smaller Philippine cutter, attempt a classic naval maneuver to box it in, but instead of executing a flawless show of force, they end up colliding with each other in a spectacular display of poor seamanship. The world watches as these massive vessels, bristling with technology and power, fail at the most basic level, simply avoiding each other on the open sea. Military analysts quickly point to a breakdown in communication and coordination. One ship, perhaps eager to impress or assert dominance, suddenly accelerates. The other, misjudging the situation, turns too sharply. In the chaos, neither crew seems aware of the other's intentions, leading to a disaster that could have easily been avoided with better training and discipline. The crews are so laser-focused on their target, the Philippine cutter, that they completely forget about the basic principle of teamwork. Their tunnel vision blinds them to the looming danger right beside them, their own ally. The result? The screech of twisting metal, clouds of billowing smoke, and a scene that instantly goes viral. What should have been a show of strength turns into a global embarrassment, replayed endlessly on social media and news outlets. The Philippine crew, bracing for confrontation, instead find themselves witnessing and filming a comedy of errors. Their cameras capture not an act of aggression but a moment of slapstick worthy of a late-night talk show. For all of China's massive naval buildup and high-profile exercises, this incident raises serious questions about the quality of their training and the professionalism of their crews. It's a reminder that hardware alone doesn't win battles. Skill and discipline matter just as much. This wasn't a complex battle or a high-stakes engagement. It was a simple test of basic ship handling, and it went spectacularly wrong. The confusion on deck is palpable as officers scramble to regain control and make sense of what just happened. The raw, unfiltered footage strips away any illusion of a flawless, unstoppable navy. Instead, it exposes the reality. Even the most powerful fleets can falter when overconfidence and poor training collide. Overconfidence, inadequate preparation, and a glaring gap between ambition and actual ability. These flaws are now on display for the entire world to see. The incident is a wake-up call, not just for China, but for any military that believes image can substitute for competence. Rival navies and military observers around the globe are watching closely, taking notes, and perhaps even rethinking their own strategies in light of this fiasco. The myth of Chinese naval invincibility has just taken a major, very public hit. The damage isn't just to the ships, it's to China's reputation as a rising maritime power. And as the world watches, the laughter grows louder. This was supposed to be a demonstration of strength. Instead, it's become a cautionary tale and a punchline. The collision footage went viral, sparking global mockery and condemnation. In Manila, it was vindication, proof of China's bullying, now impossible to ignore. Patriotic rallies erupted, hardening public resolve. The US and allies swiftly condemned China, reaffirming defense commitments. The G7 issued a rare joint rebuke, uniting against Chinese aggression. Military analysts saw more than comedy, they saw evidence of a hollow force impressive hardware, shaky skills. Beijing's propaganda machine flailed, blaming the Philippines, but nobody bought it. The attempted cover-up only deepened the humiliation. China looked not just incompetent, but dishonest. The world's response? United and unamused. For the CCP, this wasn't just a blunder, it was a catastrophic loss of face. In China, reputation is everything. Losing face is the ultimate humiliation. Xi Jinping's legacy is tied to military strength. This viral fiasco shreds that image. The party's legitimacy depends on projecting power, not slapstick. Internally, heads will roll, but the damage goes higher. Training, command, and priorities are all under scrutiny. Externally, China's aura of inevitability is cracked. Smaller nations may now resist, emboldened by the dragon's stumble. The strategy of intimidation relies on fear. This incident breeds doubt. The world saw the emperor's navy trip over its own feet. Repairing that image won't be easy. The myth of invincibility is broken, and rivals are watching closely. In the end, China's aggression has backfired spectacularly. Instead of submission, it's united rivals and global powers into a determined opposition. The Philippines is strengthening its US alliance, Vietnam is deepening ties with Japan and Australia. Japan and Australia are ramping up military cooperation, while Europe sends warships to assert freedom of navigation. China's bullying and incompetence have exposed its true nature, not a peaceful leader, but a revisionist power. The collision did more than dent steel, it shattered China's reputation and galvanized its opponents. In trying to show strength, China revealed its folly. The coalition it feared is now reality, and the world is pushing back.